heater is awfully loud today, so sorry for the sound you're going to be getting back. Today I am still working on some socks for my sister-in-law's dad. He's older and has unusually sized feet. They're a size 9 men's, of course, and triple E. Professor Google tells me that a size 9 foot is about 10 inches long and 4.5 inches wide. So I have cast on 72 stitches with this fingering weight yarn on a number 3 needle, which is bigger than what I would typically use. They're knit toe up, 2 at a time, on a circular cable needle using the Patons Kroy socks yarn, which I actually really like. It feels tough, like it'll last. I haven't heard back from anybody that I made socks with these for, that I have made socks for in which I have used this yarn. I haven't heard back yet about how well it does last. Oddly enough, I have knit myself 2 pair of socks, and one of them are too big, and one of them is when I was just figuring it out. So the benefit of knitting other people's socks, especially in quick succession like I have the last few months, is that it inspires me to actually make some more. And hopefully one of those pair will be for me. So I am doing a pattern that is a broken rib stitch, which means that I'm doing a 2x1 rib. That's 2 knits, 1 purl, 2 knits, 1 purl. What makes it a broken rib is that my next round will be all knit stitch, and it gives it this moss stitch like pattern in between the ribs. This is actually a go-to pattern of mine when I knit socks for men. It makes the knitting interesting for me, and I don't know, I just can't see many men wearing lace socks, although they should. It'd be fun. Lace knit socks are pretty, fun to make, keep you interested. Not that socks are ever boring to knit, but I have to say that knitting toe-up socks with a heel flap, as I've done here, on the back, you see I used a short row to turn the heel. I started the short row at the end, at the width that I want the heel flap to be. And then once I closed it up to what I want the shortest part of the heel to be, which in this case is 12 stitches, I then did a heel flap and pulled in from either side additional stitches that I had increased at the bottom of the foot, so that turns into a gusset here. And I promise at some point I'll do something a little more instructional to show you the structure that I use. For now, I just really like the idea of knitting and seeing what happens as we knit. So, what I was saying was, when I knit toe-up socks, I find that they are far less fussy than cuff down, and I will explain. When I first began knitting, one of the first projects I wanted to do was a sock, because I'm crazy and I didn't realize that it would be complicated, and I thought that I would just read the pattern and figure it out. And have you ever tried looking up the word gusset in the dictionary? It gave me no clues at all as to what I was supposed to be knitting when I got to that part of the sock pattern. And so it took some trial and error, and I was twisting my stitches on the heel flap, which made everything impossible to knit because I didn't realize that twisting stitches made things tighter. And eventually I got it, but it was awfully challenging. And when you knit cuff down, you do the heel flap with your backside stitches and you turn the heel. Then you pick up stitches on the side of the gusset here. And you would pick up stitches along this edge and knit around, and then go up again and start decreasing all those stitches you had picked up to create this triangular shape on the side of your sock. So your foot lays in here on the bottom, and this is behind your heel, which we reinforce when we knit them, because it will wear quickly rubbing on the back of a shoe, for example. And we like the feeling of it being hugged, at least I do. And this triangular shape here, when you get to the instep, where the sole meets the instep and the cuff, this is the gusset area here. I did not know that when I started knitting socks, and I was using the pattern on the inside of a sock yarn wrapper. I figured it out. Search terms have to be a little more specific. Search for gusset sock knitting. And that's when I was doing socks one at a time. And it was frustrating because it felt like I was knitting two of the same thing every time. Oh, look at me, talking and messing up as I go. So we will tink back here, see where I started messing up. I am at the 2x1 ribbing section of the pattern, so I am doing, this is the back side of the sock. And the back side, because I wanted my pattern to be consistent all the way around, is starting with 2 knits, and that's why I had messed up, and a purl. 2 knits and a purl. I knit continental style. A lot of people refer to that as left-hand knitting or German style knitting. I do not see knitting as either left or right-handed. I think that people who read patterns may do it that way, and I say this as a left-hander. I am left-handed, and I, as far as I can tell, don't knit too significantly different than any right-handed knitter. However, I do have a left-handed friend who does have to follow her patterns differently. I admit I didn't pay enough attention as she was knitting to know how I was doing it differently. I just find that knitting continental, I can hold the yarn closer to my work, and that makes me feel like I'm being more efficient. There's less movement for me, and everything feels pretty nicely controlled. Also, it's simply how I learned. I think that the way I learned, first of all, was I bought a kit from Joann or Michaels, and I was just trying to go by these still pictures, which were not terribly helpful. And then I also read Stitch and Bitch by Debbie, gosh, I really should look up her name. I'll link to it in the comments, or excuse me, not the comments, in the video description. I'll link to the book. But that is a fabulous book if you want to learn to knit or knit better or get a grasp of terms. It has illustrations, and she writes it very conversationally, which is what I enjoyed when I was reading it. It felt like I was actually reading a book, not that I was struggling to understand how to do something, which I was. And I'm not positive because I haven't read it in quite some time, but I feel like it was a proponent of continental style knitting. And I remember clearly the description in the book about how to hold your yarn, which is wrap around your pinky, go up across these 2 middle fingers over your index finger, and that will create even tension as you're working. And I used to think really hard about it. Now I'm going to be doing all knit stitches. I used to think very, very hard about how I was holding that yarn, and my pinky would hurt because I was focusing so much on holding it properly. Prior to knitting, I crocheted, and I didn't hold my yarn at all, really, in any particular way. In fact, now when I crochet, I find myself putting the yarn around my left hand this way, and then I just let it go. It doesn't work for me. I had no concept of technique when I was learning to crochet, and I do know from watching various other crochet videos on YouTube that I do it significantly differently. fact of the matter is, if you are getting a knit stitch off your needle and you are doing it consistently at roughly the same tension and you don't notice any big loops or holes, then it's working, right? So feel free to keep doing that. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to knit, honestly. I think there's what is comfortable for your hands, what feels good, what makes you enjoy what you're doing. And if not enjoying what you're doing, having the goal of eventually enjoying what you're doing, which was my case. I did not really enjoy struggling for 2 hours with sweaty hands and cramped fingers when I could have made an entire hat in that time crocheting. Crocheting was very quick for me, and I still feel it probably is for many people. And the reason why I switched is because I wanted to start making sweaters, and quite frankly, again, this was years and years ago before there were magazines like Interweave Crochet or a lot of just crochet websites in general. I eventually wanted to make a sweater, and I looked for patterns in the magazines that were available and the books, which are, again, I went to the aisles of Joann's and looked in those books, and I just did not like any of them. I didn't like how the crocheted stitch looked in sweater patterns, at least in those that I had found. But I did adore how the sweaters looked in the knitting magazines, and that's probably because the sweaters that we tend to purchase in stores are all knit sweaters. Knit by machine, of course, but they were familiar, and I think that that is why, as a teenager, maybe actually I was early 20s, why when I saw crocheted sweaters, they were not what I wanted. I wanted to make something that looked like what I could buy, except I made it. So I bought that kit, and I kept it under my bed, pulled it out every now and then, tried to work on it, get frustrated. Then when I was about 25, I want to say, maybe even 26, I was watching Sex and the City with a fabulous, lovely friend of mine who dabbled in all sorts of crafts. She cross-stitched, and I thought that was amazing too, and I wanted to try that as well. And we were watching Sex and the City, as was our thing, and she lived in the apartment above me, and she pulls out some knitting, and I said, "Oh, you know how to knit?" And she said, "Yeah." So I ran downstairs, and I got my kit, and I came up, and I said, "Please tell me what I'm doing wrong." And less than 10 minutes later, something clicked, and I had it, finally, after 10 years of trying solo. So if you have a friend who knows how to knit, and you've been struggling along for yourself, trying to figure it out, honestly, find one person to just show you, and it may be the one thing you need to separate yourself from what is actually going on. I do plan to put up some videos of me giving some instruction on things, because I do think it's helpful, and I enjoy teaching knitting in person, and I think I would, I think it's fun to spread the love. We should all knit. So I'm going to do just a couple more stitches here and then let you go, and feel free to leave comments and ask questions or give me something you want to see if you are learning to knit. I'm certainly not an expert, but I think I'm an expert at enjoying it, and if there's something you want me to figure out, I am happy to try to figure it out. So I'll be ending soon. Thanks for watching Kristen Knit.